I'd driven by the half-wrecked sprawl of mangled buildings on the outskirts of town countless times. We lived in a newer development my wife helped to build a few miles away. Pockets of ruin stood in various parts of Bridal Veil Lake. My wife said it would only be a matter of time before the housing crisis in Canada brought federal dollars to close these unsightly cavities. Until then, however, we had to drive from our highly planned neighborhood down a country road just to get our kids to school and buy groceries. There had been some kind of factory and office there before the demolition began. A billboard promised new housing, sort of in keeping with my wife's prediction, but the image of the hip young couple enjoying condo life faded to near white over the years. The work had stopped. I didn't think much about it until I saw a newer sticker sign pasted over the translucent couple's faces. Hiring Nightshift security, $25 an hour. I'd been a security guard when I first met my wife, at the Mapleview Mall in Burlington. We'd both just graduated. I had a Bachelor of Arts, and failed spectacularly to get into any teacher's college. She, on the other hand, came out of a solid carpentry program, had no debt, and a job in her field already. Guess which one of us became the breadwinner for our eventual family of 5. I'm not bitter about being a stay-at-home dad. In fact, it kind of rocked. I've never been particularly skilled at anything. I got pretty low grades in university. I like to read more than write. But I was good at being a parent to my daughters. When they all reached school age, however, I suddenly found myself with time again, and felt a bit lost. Sure, there's always plenty to do in a household. The work never ends. And it's great having one parent available in case a kid gets sick, which is pretty constant. You need to do something else, too, my wife said one night. Huh? You're smiling, she observed. I am? Our youngest had a fever. She'd be home the next few days, which apparently made me happy. This wasn't good. Get a job, Robert, she concluded. We could use the money. I smirked because it wasn't true. We were fine. Not rich, but comfortable. My wife had more work than she could handle and charged a lot. She yawned and stretched out on our bed. Fine, then get a hobby. Volunteer. Pursue a passion, or... I could get a security job again, I interrupted. I had fallen ass backwards into that mall security position at Mapleview, but it had worked out. I was good at it, and I enjoyed the frequent downtime between patrols, and the very rare calls for assistance. I could read. Sure, go for it, she chuckled and smiled wearily. If she didn't hit the shower in the next minute or so, she'd be out for the night. If you were a puppy, you'd be wagging your tail, Iceman. My grin went toothy. Nobody had called me Iceman in a long time. I used to shave my head and exercise, boxed a little. I guess I resembled Chuck the Iceman Liddell, an MMA fighter, enough to earn the nickname. I liked it. Vendors at the mall used to call me that all the time. 15 years ago. The most recent celebrity comparison I received came from my eldest daughter, Seth Rogen. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. Seth Rogen has many accolades in the world of entertainment. It seems like a genuinely nice person. But he isn't the Iceman. A guy who regularly knocked men out with a single punch. I'm not sure why the latter seemed more appealing. Rational priorities had never been my strong suit. I coaxed my wife into the shower and searched the internet, quickly becoming dismayed by the lack of flexible options and listed qualifications. I didn't have first aid or CPR or an Ontario security license. I got into Mapleview through a friend, and back in 2003, a security license wasn't a thing that existed. No way did I have time, money, or will enough to pass a security course. Deflated, I didn't even look up how to get a security license. If I had, I would have learned it's not such a big commitment. And I might have avoided what followed the next day when I drove by the faded billboard and the previously mentioned sticker sign. The pay was a little higher than the guard jobs I'd seen online, and apparently wasn't qualified for. Only a phone number. No email or apply online with one of those squares you have to scan with your phone. And I found that encouraging. Despite the year being 2017, I'd yet to give up my simple Nokia. I didn't want a smartphone. I didn't want my kids to ask why I had one, and they were stuck with their parentally mandated dumb phones. My wife was the exception, but she had no interest in social media or doom scrolling or whatever people stared at for hours on end. Hello? Hi, I'm inquiring about the security job posting. My name's Robert. Can you start tonight? The man spoke quickly and seemed jumpy. Huh? Can you? He insisted. Probably. Can I have some more details first? The job sounded easier than the mall. I'd be guarding the remains of the wreck in question. Bathurst Battery Company. 4 8-hour shifts a week. Monday to Thursday, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I would be home in time to get the kids ready for school and have the day to sleep. So perfect. Too perfect. I plan to arrive early, 9:30 p.m., to overlap with the guard on duty till 10. Getting into the grounds, however, proved difficult. No obvious driveway existed on the rural road at the front of the factory. I called the number on the billboard again. As it rang without answer, I began to feel a bit exposed. All of the fields and forests on the hills were pleasant during the day. At night, the absence of street lighting became very apparent. Total darkness out there. I checked the car's doors to ensure they were locked. When I pulled a night shift at Mapleview, I'd get creeped out occasionally. Being alone in a familiar place is often enough to conjure the uncanny. While I continued to wait for my still unnamed employer to answer, I tried to smile and think positive thoughts about the mildly spooky corridors of the mall. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw a middle-aged man who really did resemble Seth Rogen, grinning as if pained or severely constipated. I was scared without a good reason. Perhaps this had been a bad idea. A voicemail message answered just to say the inbox was full, and to try calling again later, or something along those lines. I swore and hung up. Then I swore again when I saw the time. 9:52. No other cars, unless they drove without headlights, could be seen ahead or behind. So I decided to drive slowly. If I didn't see an entrance, then I gave myself permission to go home and forget all about the former battery factory. As I said, I'd driven this road hundreds, maybe thousands of times. And yet, only then, on a starless, humid summer night, did I spot the dirt road in a place where some pine trees leaned over the ditch. It appeared temporary, something a construction crew might have set up to access a site. Not sure what happened to the original driveway when the factory had been operational. Heavy tree branches swept the car, needles scratching along the windows, as I cautiously pulled into what turned out to be a long driveway, straight through the exposed guts of the factory. Offices had been torn open. Desks and yellowed papers teetered on the sagging ledges of cracked hardwood floors. I could imagine the surprised faces of the people who worked there, as if they'd been inside during the first attack by the indifferent demolitioners. One minute they've got a job, a life, and an immediate task that probably seemed important at the time. Then the wrecking ball rips away the thin veneer holding this reality together, and they're surprised by the fragility of bricks and mortar, and their absolute dependence on these materials to maintain ultimately trivial relationships with coworkers. Far more destruction had been wrought upon the warehouses and the equipment therein. I imagined all valuable pieces had been stripped before the buildings had been squashed like fat pill bugs. In a few places, the ground had been swept clean, and even dug up. A pair of shovels had been buried to the respective hilt and abandoned. I thought of the gravediggers in Hamlet. Hamlet is upset by the gravedigger singing, while he clears a grave of previous skulls. Custom hath made it in him a property of easiness, Horatio says. In plain English, dude handles the dead every day, and he's out of fucks to give about it. The gravedigger asks, what is he that builds stronger than either the mason, the shipwright, or the carpenter? It's not a trick question. The answer makes sense if you're a true believer in God. I'm not, but I still believe it. These morbid thoughts followed me to an interior parking lot of sparse gravel and dirt. A motion light tacked to the side of a portable lit up, and I gasped as if pulled from watery depths. An old Pontiac had been parked directly beside a concrete step. The driver's side had been carefully aligned with the portable door. Someone really hated walking. Or maybe Fred couldn't. A lot of security guards were old and shockingly frail for protective services. They were usually planted in a monitor room with a phone and a walkie-talkie, eyes and a voice to speak with police or security supervisors. Patrols not required. Judging by the car, its vintage and proximity to the door, I was sure this would also be the case for me, for which I was grateful. The thought of walking these ruins did not help to remedy my growing apprehension. I hadn't even got out of the car yet. 10:06. Officially late. I shut off the engine and opened the door like a spaz. Humidity filled my nostrils. A plague of stifling moisture, tainted by industrial odors I couldn't identify. The factory had been closed for decades. Why did it still smell like oil or whatever? The lonely motion light quit, and the darkness swallowed the suggestion of a parking lot. I moved, flailed, to activate the motion sensor, but nothing happened. Caught in the pitch, I stifled the urge to yelp and worked from memory to locate the concrete stoop. Before I could find the knob, the door opened, and I was blinded by an overkill of lamps and utility lights. "You're late," the predicted old man grouched before I could even see him. "Get in, please." He didn't wait for me to obey, but grabbed my wrist with the sometimes surprising strength of the elderly. Once inside, he shut the door, and threw a heavy bolt in addition to the button lock on the interior of the knob. He exhaled sharply, a partial whistle. I could see him, a stooped figure with yellowy white strands of hair retreating from a shiny, smooth crown. Pinprick retinas averted focusing on anything specific, including me. "You're late," he said, more calmly this time. "Sorry, I know. I tried to be early. Finding my way here? I couldn't see the driveway." The frantic search function of his eyes had seemingly malfunctioned. He stared at nothing intensely. "Fred, right?" He blinked. "What? What'd you call me?" "Fred?" The man on the phone, our boss, I guess, said Fred would be waiting. And here you are, so... No, not me, he said. "I'm not Fred." Not Fred held the back of his hand over his mouth and shuffled to a set of lockers against an otherwise bare wall of utilitarian concrete. On the opposite wall, a dozen monitors offered nothing but the shady reflections of the old man and a Seth Rogen look-alike. Cameras offline? A uniform half off the hanger appeared in my face. "Here you go. Get changed after I leave." He pointed to the far wall opposite the exit, where a worn recliner, a cot, and a small refrigerator decayed in unison. "You hang out there. Take a nap. Use the fridge. If there's a problem, use the landline to call the supervisor. Don't call the police. Don't bother trying to use your cell phone. It won't work here. Concrete's thick. It didn't occur to me then why there would be additional concrete walls inside a steel portable. I don't have a smartphone, I offered. He didn't hear or didn't care. Don't leave the box. Not ever. No matter what. Gathering up his things, I noticed a book among them, which made me realize I'd forgotten my bag, and my books in the car. Oh, okay, I concurred. Is it alright if I run to my car quickly to grab my stuff? Once again, the man didn't acknowledge that I'd spoken. He paused at the exit and spoke his final advice with his back turned. You're just here so the corporation that owns this land can say they employed reasonable security measures to keep trespassers safe. Call in if something's amiss. And remember, never leave the box until the end of your shift. You got that? But how am I gonna know if there's a problem without any cameras? Or without, leaving the box to patrol? His hand rattled the knob. You never leave the box. There's no need. Full bathroom behind that door. The cameras are busted for good. Nobody from the corporation cares to have it fixed. Have a good night. The door swung open, and he fled into the driver's side of his car, locking it before the rebounding force closed up the portable. I could barely hear the start of his engine or the car pull away. For a moment, I stared at the exit, unsure what to do first. The place doesn't even have windows, I said to now fled not Fred. Guy didn't even give me his name. I crossed the floor to the recliner and took a seat. An embroidered name badge had been sewn to the uniform across my lap. Fred. Of course. Fred didn't work here anymore. Who was Fred? I guess I would be until I figured out when to quit. I checked my Nokia. Not Fred had been correct about the lack of reception. Probably a few steps out of the box and I'd have service. A walkie-talkie had been left on the table with a stack of dead monitors. It gave me just enough hope to be crushed when it didn't snap on. I put it back in the tech graveyard. Feeling alone and isolated, as I might have mentioned, is occasionally part of being a security guard. But this whole deal was fucked. I thought about dumping the uniform and calling, using the landline to quit. I'd be home in 20 minutes, safe and cozy in my bed with my darling snorer. It sounded nice. A nice rut. I'd be back to hoping one of my kids got sick so I had a purpose again. Looking around the bright but bleak office space, I recalled some of the characters I'd met who were lifelong security guards. Some were pretty nutty. Not Fred would get along fine with those guys. And the poor communication and incompetence of management, a daily occurrence. It had been 15 years since I'd done the job, and my previous nostalgia and excitement had conveniently edited out the worst parts. I could still do this. But I needed my books and the snacks I'd packed. I changed into Fred's old uniform. Had the one who'd worn it last actually been Fred? The embroidery spoke of a company that cared about their employees. Nothing else in the box suggested any acknowledgement of the men who worked here as human beings. There had been a concrete office at Mapleview, too, and old furniture. I looked for a flashlight. A couple had been stashed in a cubby in a locker, and were also dead. How hard was it to replace a battery in a former battery factory? I took the cheap torches and added it to the growing pile of dead devices. No matter. Surely the motion sensor light outside would be triggered by my sprint. Smartphones had a flashlight function. Old Nokias did not. The screen brightness in 2003 had been traded for energy efficiency. The flashlight app had been the one thing my wife enjoyed about her new phone. I sighed. feeling I'd officially become old, stubbornly clinging to things from the past, not because they really were better, but because they were familiar. There were 5 lamps, 3 identical green-shaded end table types, and 2 standing lamps guarding the door. Cautiously, already breaking orders for the sake of a sandwich and some light reading, I opened the door a crack. In the narrow shaft of light, an oppressive quiet arrived. It was summer. Where were the crickets? I had to stifle the urge to retreat, and grit my teeth to fully open the door, which I braced with the edge of one of the standing lamp's dusty shades. The exposed bulb shone brighter. I tipped the shaft and leaned it against the doorknob. Now I'd have a beacon to return to, in case the motion sensor went the way of the walkie, the monitors, the flashlights. The first step onto the stoop sounded obscenely loud. I had my keys ready. The lot kept a cloak that could be penetrated by clicking the open button on my fob. Car lights flickered, and I kept mashing the button until the motion sensor light fulfilled its duty. I broke into a jog, whipped open the passenger door, and found an empty seat. My stuff. I'd forgotten it all right, but not in the car. It was at home, in a backpack, which I'd hung over the banister to put my shoes on. Ugh. Everyone had gone to bed before I'd left, so no one called to tell me. I mouthed my favorite expletive and closed the door as quietly as possible, and the lights went out. Both of them. I clicked the fob to lock the car, and the brief flicker presented the portable, and someone standing on the concrete stoop. Jesus! I gasped, violently jamming my thumb against the fob. Another flicker, and another, and nothing. Nothing there. No one there. There'd been someone, though. They had arms and legs, and they were naked. I couldn't see facial features. Too brief a glimpse. The face? I couldn't see a face. Because they didn't have one. That couldn't be right. I knew what I saw. I argued with myself in my head while paralyzed in the blinking dark. Another savory choice prepared itself from the fear. Leap in the car and go home. Or do your job and see if a naked person had gone into the portable. How could I have only been on the job for 15 minutes? A middle solution existed. I searched my pockets for the Nokia, and felt the embroidered thread on the uniform. Yes. Of course. Of course. I'd left the phone in my other pants because it had no use as a flashlight. 15 years of parenting had cooked my brain to mush. Go home. Buy a smartphone. Buy all your kids smartphones. Get a bundle deal. After the next squeeze of the headlights, however, I took a dragging step towards the portable. Okay, I wheezed, and cleared my throat, preparing to speak more forcefully, and with all the authority of one who'd been tasked to secure a location of no personal importance. I have seen you enter my office. Thankfully, my voice remained steady. Come out now, and I won't call the police. Silence. Wind moved the branches of a twisted tree on the edge of the parking lot, and somehow it didn't make a sound. My next step in the abbreviated light moved gravel, and yet no soul scraping against stone could be heard. The world had muted itself. I feared to speak. If I heard nothing, then it meant I'd gone deaf. And if I heard my words, and not the wind through the trees, or the crunch of gravel under my shoe, then I'd gone mad. So I said nothing, and woodenly clomped to the concrete stoop. The naked light bulb resting on the interior knob buzzed once and lit. I kept pressing the fob. Shock forms habits swiftly. The abundance of lighting inside the portable made any hiding spots obvious. Either side of the door, the bathroom, inside a locker, if they were small, or under the monitor table. The recliner, with its rocking feature, had been set against the far wall. I tossed my keys into the room first, hoping to lure any potential intruder from a point of ambush. The back of the fob popped open on impact. A circular cylinder battery rolled across the floor. The tall lamp could serve as a kind of bow staff. I had no such weapons training, and had only gotten a green belt in karate when I was 12. Nevertheless, I entered fast, and swung the light vigorously one way, which pulled the cord out of the wall, and then the other, finding no intruder in wait. I closed the door, slid the bolt, and turned the tiny lock on the knob as not Fred had. No one lurked under the table. All the lockers I'd left open during my flashlight search remained that way. That left the bathroom. I set down the lamp and did a quick visual scan for a better weapon. Few practical options presented themselves. Dead monitors could be hucked. The cylindrical flashlights had been surrounded with hard rubber. It would hurt to be smacked across the face with one, but the blow would have to be deadly accurate in order to debilitate an intruder. Inside the fridge, not Fred or someone else had left a half-finished beer. If shattered, a handy stabbing weapon, which would get me arrested. Fun fact I'd heard from a drunk lawyer back in the day. If someone breaks into your house, use a blunt object to defend yourself. Stabbing weapons, he said, indicate a fatal intent. Baseball bats, it could be argued, implied unconsciousness first. Not sure if any of this is true. He was pretty drunk. But I never forgot the advice. I chose the flashlight, and opened the bathroom door before I could think and hesitate some more. A figure in the darkened bathroom mirror stared back. I threw the flashlight, and it chipped the bottom corner of the mirror. I exhaled and lamented falling for the cliché of getting a fright from my own reflection. Nobody had entered the portable because, in all likelihood, I'd only imagined seeing a person on the stoop. The mind sees the worst in an unknown. That's how humans survive. Think the worst and you'll try to prepare for it, or at least run away. There's no cost to being wrong and running. There's a huge cost if you're wrong and stay. I double-checked the lock, restored the lampshade and lamp to its grimy home beside the door, and went to the recliner with nothing to do. I had a lot of time to pass. Pat the armrests, bump my heel against the bottom of the chair, make a few noises with my mouth. That was enough recliner time. 10:35. 7 hours and change to go. I looked at the cot. The pillow had been white once upon a time, but an age of sweat had dyed it a disgusting yellow. I would rather sleep on the floor. I started pacing. That used up a few minutes. This was stupid. Not a real security job. I couldn't see or hear outside the box. It wasn't police work or a sworn duty, but it was still a responsibility. If I said I'd guard a place, then, well, that's my word. Did that mean I should go on patrol? Hell no. In high school, I'd taken grade 10 electrical. The teacher seemed to suffer from a dissociative disorder, but the textbook had been solid, and taught me a little. I'd also changed out a few light switches in my home successfully, and only been electrocuted once. Just as I continued to derive confidence from memories of simple home repair and renovation, I moved a monitor and discovered the problem. The system had been artfully unplugged. I picked up the hefty surge protector where multiple plugs remained embedded, and examined it. Nothing damaged. I took my chances and plugged it into the wall socket. Stuff began happening immediately. The monitor switched on without a picture. It would take anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes for the whole system to begin relaying visuals from wherever the cameras had been positioned. During the wait, I mentally criticized the crazy, lazy, scraggly-haired not Fred. He clearly did not want to do one iota of work at the factory, or in life. That's why he parked so close to the door. That's why he hadn't buzzed off the remnants of his awful hair. And that's why he'd obviously unplugged the cameras and claimed a malfunction had occurred. The monitors began populating images of the factory. Barrels containing some hazardous waste, no doubt. A host of access points with signs advising trespassers to make better choices. And one I didn't understand. A bare patch of earth surrounded by caution tape, and a sign too pixelated to read. I squinted and came close to pressing nostrils to undusted glass. That's when I saw the first faint outline of a person in the shadows, standing just to the side of the mound. What the fuck? The figure took a step back, retreating into the shadows. Another second passed, and a strange blur obfuscated the camera lens. Large, dark, and fast. Reception on the camera disrupted, and briefly displayed a no signal message, before resuming without the figure or the blur. None of the other monitors showed any activity. To my pants-shitting horror, the suggestion of a person returned a second later to the soil patch monitor. I took my time studying every inch offered, and the feet, ever so slightly crossing into whatever light had been set up there, confirmed the suspicion. Someone had entered the factory. I picked up the landline, ready to dial, but the phone dialed automatically. It rang on for an eternity before an answering machine picked up.
"Hey there,"
said a weary male's voice.
"This is Brett. Leave a message."
The beep followed, and I did as instructed. "Brett, this is Robert. I'm at the Bathurst Battery Company site, and there's an intruder at the dirt patch. There might be someone else here too, and..." A heavy breather picked up the line before I could finish the message, but they didn't say hello, so I did. "Hello? Brett? Is this Brett? Are you my supervisor or manager? I don't know what titles the company uses. It's my first day. First hour." He continued breathing for an extended moment.
What's going on?"
Oh man, I knew that voice. Hadn't heard it since university, but it would be a thing that never really changed. Brett had partaken of the plant. I'd tried smoking marijuana, but it hadn't been my thing. No judgment on Brett, of course. Lots of security guards got high on the job. In my opinion, they were a step better than the ones that drank. "Brett," I said slowly, "there's a trespasser or trespassers at my site. Can you call the police?"
"What? Dude, I'm not even Brett. What are you talking about? Brett quit like 2 months ago. Or died, maybe. Did Brett die?"
Are you asking me about Brett? Because I don't know. I don't know Brett. I thought you were Brett.
"I'm not Brett, but that's pretty funny."
He forced out a laugh that made him actually start laughing. "Look," I said, "I'm at the Bathurst Battery site. There's a trespasser. Call the police and ask them to come down, okay?"
"Come down there?"
"Yes," I confirmed, patiently.
"Alright, cool. I'm on my way."
"No, not..." He hung up, and I got Brett's answering machine when I called back. I thought about leaving the box to use my cell to call the police. Conveniently, that would be against not Fred's orders. I couldn't shake off the feeling I'd seen someone. Let not Brett figure it out. If he even arrived. He definitely shouldn't be behind the wheel in his condition. I brought the landline close to the cameras and resumed my watch. The feet, bare or in sandals, remained. Why would someone just stand absolutely still for so long? Because there isn't anyone there? It's pareidolia, the tendency of the mind to see people in shapes and objects that are, in reality, only vaguely reminiscent of a person. They'd moved, though. Plus, there had been a second blur across the lens. I considered what I could see in addition to the soil patch and the feet. Safety cones had been wrapped with an abundance of caution tape. Multiple layers stretched to four corners. A breeze through the area teased some light thread, attached to the stick holding the sign I couldn't read. The size of everything became more important. Those feet, if that's what they were small. The words on the sign were tiny too, and the sign itself. Whoever installed the camera had put it high to make vandalism difficult. That meant that whatever had crossed the lens had either been immense and on ground level with the frozen figure, or minuscule and close to the camera. I recalled a traffic camera on the highway covered by a spider, which the BVL morning news team found so interesting, they returned to it before and after each commercial break. My kids were right. I should cancel our cable TV. But why did the figure retreat into the shadows a moment before the blur, if it had only been a spider they couldn't possibly see? I continued to stare and think without any progress. Not Fred's unfinished and likely flat beer became a temptation. I took a step back from the table to see more of the monitors, and caught movement in the right peripheral immediately. That blur again. The tail of it, anyway. It flew by a mostly dark hole with more caution tape, and a sign I could read. Danger. Open pit. Fall will result in severe injury or death. Another spider close to the lens wouldn't be impossible. I scanned each screen to try and get a sense of the hazards in the factory. One of the cameras had been mounted above the concrete stoop just outside. With the motion sensor light off, however, not much could be seen. Movement again in the top left monitor. None of the other spiders had revisited the lens. I grudgingly accepted the non-arachnid truth. The black shape momentarily blotting out the view had to be something else. I entertained several unsatisfactory answers as to what it could be. No person could be that massive and that fast. Another animal, one that could fly, maybe a huge bat or an owl, could be responsible. There would have to be a few to explain the activity on different cameras. Those hazard areas appeared distinct, and fairly separated from one another. But the feet stomped big holes in these possibilities. Someone was standing right there, goddammit. So perfectly still. It didn't make any sense. What the hell were they doing? Just as I began to entertain further thoughts about going outside to use the phone, a pounding knock against the door made me leap back awkwardly to the side of the table. I looked at the monitor. The motion sensor light had been activated. A scruffy, sleepy guy in his 20s knocked again. Not Brett had arrived. He'd probably be useless, but at least I wouldn't be alone. I moved to open the door when I caught movement in the soil monitor. The owner of those feet stepped out of the shadows. To my horror, those toes stuck out the ends of a sandal too small, just like the guy on the stoop. The guy had the same scruff. They both needed a haircut. The two Not Brett similarities ended there. From the shadows, the man by the soil appeared alert and afraid. He stared up at the camera and shook his head. The other remained lazy-eyed and continued to wait. I froze and flinched when another barrage of pounding came from outside.
Open up, man!
He shouted. It had to be loud to infiltrate the nearly soundproofed portable.
Come on! It's creepy out here.
I looked at the monitor version. He continued to shake his head, no. Wings blotted out the camera briefly. And the not Brett and his feet were gone.
Come on, dude!
I watched him turn around and meander off, presumably to his car. The monitor version stopped moving. And I do mean he froze, like someone hit a pause button, but without the usual attendant static. A drug addict might achieve such inhuman stillness. A gradual smile awoke the face, spreading like the realization of a cruel idea. The creature. Yes, I understood then it couldn't be a man. Opened its mouth to release an appendage-like tongue, black, and it wagged in the gloom. Oh God, oh God, oh God. Not Brett, the real not Brett, appeared on another screen. He hadn't gone back to his car. He cupped both hands around his ears to improve his hearing, like an idiot. What? He mouthed. I'm sure of it. And I knew that thing spoke. What it said must have been interesting or concerning to even a confused mind like his. Oh God, oh God, oh God. I had to do something. I had to leave the box. Go after him, warn him. But where had he gone exactly? I didn't know the grounds. Calling the police on the Nokia wouldn't bring them in time. I didn't want to go either because I'd seen that hateful thing on the stoop. Yes, I had. No amount of rationalizing would take away the imprinted image when I closed my eyes. Something vaguely person-shaped, blurry, without identity or shame. It could not reason, but could feel. And it knew it had been wronged. The anger could not be articulated. And, like any infantile creature, it lashed out for lack of a better option. What is he that builds stronger than either the mason, the shipwright, or the carpenter? The answer, if you didn't know, is a gravedigger. That soil had been a grave. Not Brett stumbled through the dark, while his monstrous double continued calling what I assumed to be his real name. I wish I could say I burst out of the box to shout a warning or chase after him. But the reality is, well, realistic. Through a narrow crack in the door, I choked out, "Hey! Hey! Back! Come back!" And I closed the door. Not because I'm a coward, but because I'm selfish. My wife, my kids, I wanted to see them again. By the time I returned to the monitors, the thing with the wagging tongue was gone, and I saw no sign of the wandering man. It had gotten him. I'm not sure what it did exactly, but I thought about the hole. So that's where I looked. Sure enough, he crawled out. Not he, though. Not a man. No man wall crawls from a pit with such grace and pleasure. I tried the landline again. No answer. The not Brett thing moved so fast, and then it appeared on the monitor displaying the stoop.
"Dude,"
he said flatly.
"let me in."
He knocked.
"Come on."
"Go away." I could hear his voice clearly, but not Fred's car engine earlier. It sounded like a cat's purring through the door. Another knock.
"Open up. It's cold out here. I need to talk."
I unplugged the power bar for the monitors.
"What's wrong, Robert?"
I went to the yellow pillow on the bed.
"What's wrong?"
I plugged my ears. No sleep to save me. The pillow smelled like earwax and sweat. But time passed unusually fast. And then 2 rough hands had my wrists and pulled them away from my head. No, no! I fought to get away until I saw who'd arrived. Not Fred let me go and took a step back. You left the box, he concluded. I nodded slowly. Suppose you're done then, he added, and I rolled from the bed. He put an arm out to stop me and pointed at my chest. You're gonna need that back before you go. I stripped right there and gathered my clothes and shoes in a ball before walking to my car on a bright, sunny morning. Naturally, no one was awake when I got home. The kids didn't have school, and my wife had the day off. When I crawled into bed beside her, she pulled my head to hers. What's wrong? She asked, still half asleep. Without hesitation, thought, or regret, I answered, nothing. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.